Yo, yo, yo. I'm Candy B. I be knitting. This is Candy B knitting. This week I be finishing my Audrey Shawl and delivering a deep dive video to y'all. So I have notes here. We're gonna start with, I'm gonna go over the pattern, talk about the construction, give my review of the pattern, talk in detail about my finished object, and tell you very last, but certainly not least, about the yarn I used. So this is the Audrey Shawl. The pattern is written by Tricot et Stitch, aka Christelle Bagia, and it is obviously a crescent-shaped shawl. The pattern is free. I am coming to you April 2025. The original pattern was published September 2015. Did I mention it was free? And as of recording today, there are 188 Ravelry projects of this. It is available in English and in French, and the pattern is a total of 9 pages long. Some of the requirements: US 5 needles or 3.75 millimeter, 2 stitch markers, and then an optional crochet hook, 3.5 millimeter crochet hook or size E crochet hook for an optional bind off. It calls for 695 to 800 yards, 400 of those yards or a full skein of fingering weight yarn for what they call the main color, and depending on which contrasting color, between 16 yards and 49 yards of your contrast color, you'll need the most of what they call the contrast color 9. The gauge is 21 stitches by 30 rows of blocked stockinette, and according to the pattern schematic, the final shawl comes to 49 inches wide, not tip to tip, but if you have the from the widest part of the shawl to the other widest part of the shawl, and 25 inches deep. The skills you'll need for this pattern, besides your basic knit purl, it calls for a garter tab cast on. It is charted. There are very few row by row instructions. If you've never carried your yarn up the side when striping, that's something that you'll kind of need to figure out what you're doing. And you'll need if you do the crochet cast off, you'll need some rudimentary crochet skills, mostly chaining and crochet. As far as the construction, as I said before, it starts with a garter tab cast on. Then you proceed to carry a garter border the whole time you're knitting. In between that, you start with your garter tab cast on, then you go into section 1, which she calls circular stripes, and it's stockinette stitch mixed with these eyelets. And then the second part is a section called wavy stripes, and there's a section 2 where it's the wavy stripes striping with the contrast color and the main color, and then at the very end of the shawl, the section 3 is just stripes of the contrast colors you have left over. As far as skill level, I would call this not beginner, advanced beginner. Like if you've made a shawl and you want your next shawl to be a little bit, next level, probably your second or third shawl. Just because of some of how the pattern is written, or if you've never done lace before, it might be a little bit intimidating. Definitely not, I wouldn't call this a first project. I believe it would be equally interesting for a advanced knitter, because even if you're advanced, I believe there is enough interest here to kind of keep you going. And I'm going to get into the pattern in a little bit, but I found the pattern, if you are on the more advanced side, you can kind of play around with it a little bit more. It's very meditative once you get into it, and it's certainly written for, I would call, a higher level knitter. Also, I just think it's really great for, it's targeted for using mini skeins, and I know that that is a, people are always looking for good patterns to use with mini skeins. I feel like a beginner, if you were kind of intimidated by this or you didn't have a collection of mini skeins, you could do like a color changing yarn, and I believe that would be super effective. But you could also, you could use like a one ball gradient of yarn, or you could use whatever scraps you have and mix and match. You don't necessarily have to keep the same pattern here. So what did I think of this pattern? I don't do like stars or thumbs up, thumbs down. My thing is, did I like the pattern? Yes or no? Yes, I love the pattern. Would I knit it again? Absolutely. So that's, to me, that's my highest praise I can give to a pattern, is whether or not I liked it, but then the thought of, would I do this again? That's pretty high praise, because I don't usually knit the same thing over and over again. So what did I like about this pattern? I thought it was incredibly well written for a free pattern. She talks about how she started this pattern. It was basically, as a knitwear designer, as a knitter, she felt like she wanted to give a gift to the knitting community. And so she made a free pattern, and it's fully tested, which you don't really get with a lot of free patterns. So the price is always right with free, but then the fact that it's well written on top of that. The other thing that I was alluding to earlier, as far as like the style of the pattern, I appreciated, and this is my, like, how I like patterns to be, it's not a line by line, because this is, how many rows? This has to be at least 200 rows of knitting. And it's not like row 1, row 2, row 3. She starts the pattern off with like an overall guidance of how the pattern's going to go, and she specifies, hey, read this whole thing before you start. And she's like, okay, you're gonna have a border on the edge, and then basically she kind of just gives you the stitch. So like for this circular stripe section, there's a main color stripe, and then there's a contrast color stripe, and then there's an increase stripe. And she's just like, for section 1, do this, do these types of stripes, do this type of stripe. It's not like row 1, knit 1, da da da. You just go to where she describes what you're supposed to do. I don't think I'm sure if you knit patterns like that before, you know what I'm trying to say. And so I appreciated that. So all I had to do was, oh, I'm on a contrast color row. Let me look at what to do when you have a contrast color, rather than being like, am I on row 50 or row 49? And it's like just nice tables throughout the pattern, and the tables have the stitch count, which I always appreciate when I'm working on a shawl. She tells you at the end of each section how many stitches you're supposed to have. And then when you get to the chart, obviously, the chart isn't row by row instructions. It's just like, hey, this is the chart. When you're on a wrong side row, purl. Aside from that, just follow the chart. So 9 pages. I think 2 pages is actual written instructions. The rest of it is like, pictures and what the acronyms mean and stuff like that. But the actual pattern itself is pretty well condensed down. Like I said, I liked that she kind of gives you a little synopsis up front of what to expect. I found her yardage estimates to be very helpful. She gives you tips about that. Like I said, about 400 yards of your main color. And then she tells you, hey, you have this, because, as you're knitting this shawl, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you're using up more yarn per row. So she tells you how to get gauge, how to swatch. And then, she says, contrast color 9, it's going to be pretty tight with yardage, because that's the yarn you're using the most, because that's the yarn that's at this widest point in the shawl. And so check your gauge, check your needle size. With my contrast color 9, I just picked the yarn that I had the most of to use that as my contrast color. But all the other ones, I ended up using just over 10 grams of my contrast color 9. And so this whole shawl, accounting for gauge, if you have at least 20 gram minis, you should be able to do this whole shawl. And obviously your main color, either a whole skein of that or any one of these stripes can be different colors. I appreciated that there was a schematic, which I don't see. First of all, I don't see schematics in a lot of patterns, let alone in a shawl pattern. And so she actually has a picture of how you should block it. And she has the measurements of tip to tip, how deep it should be. And you almost like block it kind of like the Millennium Falcon. So, you know, you bring out the arms like this. Sometimes it can just be a little bit overwhelming dealing with a giant piece of wet cloth and where to put your pins and stuff. So I appreciated that. Just a couple of nits about the pattern, recognizing that it is free. I did not care for when you're alternating the stockinette and then you go to block the stockinette, you get kind of like a rippling almost because of the difference in the stitch, you know, basically. And so she had this, when you come from your circular stripes and you go into your wavy stripes, from here, see where this blue is? From here to here was all stockinette with the main color. And even in the final, what do you call it? Project pictures from the pattern, you could see like it kind of buckled and rippled a little bit because of the difference in gauge between the lace sections and the stockinette sections. And so it just created this big block of stockinette that didn't look very attractive to me. And so that was the impetus behind adding another color in with another eyelet row to break up that stockinette to make it lay a little bit flatter. So that was my only like true, I wouldn't even call it beef with the pattern, but that was the thing that I was like, I don't really like the look of that. I also did not care for the bind off, so I did a different bind off. As far as how the pattern is written, myself and someone else in the Ravelry project pages noted that the last chart, she has chart 1, 2, 3 for the big sections, and then she has a chart for the bind off. And the bind off chart repeats the last line of one of the main charts. And so you have a duplicate of one line and then it goes into the bind off. And it's like, okay, and maybe they're just trying to show you side by side how the bind off looks with the last row of the pattern. But then there are separate instructions for how to do the bind off where it tells you to do 2 more rows and garter stitch of your main color. So either there's the number on the row count is wrong, or the chart and the bind off instructions didn't agree with one another. It felt like an error to me. And so just be mindful if you're looking at row 151 and you're on, or 150 rather, and you're on chart 3, and then you go to the next chart and you see row 150 again, it's a duplicate. It's not, oh, do the main color. You'll know it if you read the pattern. When I read the person's note on Ravelry, I didn't necessarily understand. And then I got to the last row, I was like, oh. And so she has written instructions of how to do the bind off. So I just followed those instructions. So that's that. But like I said, you should be able to pick up on it because you're going to be like, oh, I just did this row and I did it in the contrast color. I should be switching to my main color and doing the instructions for the bind off at this point. And then the other quirk in the pattern is she has links to a garter tab cast on tutorial and links to a tutorial of how to do the crochet chain bind off. And I was not able to click on those links. I downloaded the pattern on my phone and I downloaded it on my laptop, and my PDF reader would not let me click either way. And I saw other people commenting that they were not able to use those links as well. I know how to do a garter tab cast on. She has instructions. If you follow the instructions in the pattern, you're fine. But if you've just never done one before and you want to see someone else do it before you try it, just Google or go to YouTube and type in garter tab cast on, and you'll see tutorials. And then the crochet bind off is a little bit trickier, but I was also able to find YouTube tutorials on that. I ultimately did not do the crochet bind off, but just know that it's not like some exotic technique. You'll be able to find tutorials on it even if the hyperlinks don't work for you. So let's talk about my finished project in particular. I used the prescribed needles in the pattern. I did not gauge swatch. My final shawl is 37 inches at its widest point and 22 inches deep, which you'll notice is a tad bit smaller than the schematic in the pattern. One, I am a relatively tighter knitter, and B, I just was kind of nervous blocking it. I didn't want to get too aggressive. I did pin each of these little points here to kind of open up this lace here, but I probably could have opened up this lace a little bit more. I had a limited amount of pins. I have like the 3x3 Coconuts foam boards. So I just was not able to have that much space to pin it out that much. What I did do is I folded it in half to block it. And I also don't care for my stockinette to be too loosey-goosey either, so I just was trying to be very mindful of how open I wanted it to be. And so I pinned it in half and blocked it that way. And then after it dried, I obviously had a crease here, and so I just hit it with a steamer and the crease completely disappeared. This is also superwash yarn, so I imagine over time, as I wear it, as I wash it, it'll get deeper. But I think it's a very fine size, and I'm close to the finished measurements. I wasn't looking for something like slankety, especially with like a lacy shawl. I don't need it to be like massive. The other thing here is I used the pattern calls for 1 main color and 9 contrasting colors. I used 12 colors total. So I had 2 main colors and an extra contrasting color. So up here I have this gold color. That was my first main color. I did 9 eyelet rows with my contrasting colors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then, as I said before, I broke up that section of stockinette with 1 more contrasting color here. And then when I went into the wavy stripe section, I switched my my main color to this deep purple yarn. And then when I got to the very end of the pattern, you start with contrast color 1 through 9. Then when you get to the wavy stripes, you reverse the striping. You start with 9 and you go back to 1. And so when I got back to my contrasting color 1, I did another repeat on my own. I did the charts myself to add another stripe of contrast color 10. Then I did 1 more row of the gold, which was my first main color, and then I switched to my main color B for the bind off. And so I ended up with 2 extra rows of this eyelet down here. And it was super easy to add because it's a pretty consistent lace pattern. And like I said, it's charted, and I kind of just interpolate it based on the rhythm of the chart. Because what you're doing is you do this garter stitch and then you have yarn overs here on the edge here. And so the only thing the chart is really helping you do is how to incorporate your increases with that yarn over into the pattern. And so once you recognize what's happening there, it's pretty easy to keep going, and you could keep going as far as you want it with this. So the other thing here, I guess, is a tip, is the pattern only calls for 2 stitch markers, because basically she just wants you to mark where your garter stitches are so that you maintain that border. But I ended up using 27, 30, at least 30 stitch markers will be on the safe side. And I put stitch markers at every single lace repeat. and that turns into, each of these lace rows is 17 stitches across to do the lace repeat. And so I would just put a stitch marker there. So after a certain point, I stopped counting how many stitches I had in a row, and I just recognized, hey, this 17 stitch lace repeat, if I get to the end of that and something's off, that means my stitch count is off and I need to go back and fix a mistake. And it's makes things much easier than being like, okay, let me read this chart, because you know it's a pretty massive chart and you're doing like repeats of the chart. The other thing I did different is I did not do, she has a crochet chain bind off, wherein you bind off a stitch, then you create a chain of crochet stitches, then you bind off another stitch, so you have loops of crochet chains in between each stitch, and then you actually pin out each of those little loops. I did not feel like doing that, nor did I like the look of it, and so I did picot. This is my first time doing picot. I did a pretty decent job. My stitch count was an odd, and I cast on 2 stitches for the picot, and my stitch count was just like 1 or 2 stitches off at the very end, but it doesn't really matter. It just creates these little lumps here. I think it looks pretty darn good for my first picot. The only thing I would have done differently, I was kind of rushing a little bit towards the end because I could see the finish line. I probably should have like just got up and grabbed a DPN. That would have helped me keep my tension a little bit more even. I always like to cast off my shawls like this with DPNs because I was working on a 40-inch ChiaoGoo, and you know the whole shawl is like scrunched up like this, and you're working these picots and you're trying to cable cast on and keep your tension very even, but the whole weight of the shawl is kind of holding you down at the same time. And so using a DPN in this hand kind of lets the shawl hang here, and I don't have to worry about finagling both ends of the ChiaoGoo fixed circulars. So that's that. Yeah, I think that's all the changes I made from the pattern. And yeah, like I said, you could just keep going forever. In the lace, eventually you would start adding more and more repeats and need more and more stitch markers though. I think I needed, at the very end, I only added 1 more repeat as far as like the 17 stitch increments. So this yarn is Rich Hill Yarns. It wasn't exclusive to Dances with Wool, which is one of my local yarn stores here in Virginia. It's located in Midlothian. As of recording, it's not on the website anymore, so I don't know if it's going to be discontinued or they're retooling it or what. But it's a very standard indie dyed light fingering weight, 463 yards per 100 grams, 75 superwash merino, 25% nylon. Yeah, very just run-of-the-mill base that a lot of dyers use. And that's one of the bases. She did a mixture of bases in her sample for the pattern, but one of the yarns was a 75-25. Really no complaints. I did use color catchers when I went to go block this, but I didn't have any bleeding. Just one more time, I'm going to go through all of these colorways with y'all, because I feel like sometimes I would flip-flop the names, and so I've done the whole shawl at this point, so I should have all of the names down. So this first color here, my first main color, this gold color, is called the Jefferson, named after the Jefferson Hotel in downtown Richmond. I'm assuming it's supposed to evoke the gold and the brass and the opulence. And then my second color down here, this dark deep purple, is called Lewis Ginter, which is the Botanical Gardens in Richmond. So those are my 2 main colors, and I had 2 full skeins of those, and I used about 50 to 60 grams of each of those. Then for my contrasting colors, this first one is Pony Pasture. It's a little inlet where you can get into the James River. This second color here is like a more silvery gray, and that's called Nickel Bridge, which is the gray of the bridge, but also you can probably guess a long time ago the toll to the bridge was a nickel. Not a nickel anymore, but we still call it the Nickel Bridge. Then there's like this plum color, and that is Bryan Park. No, yeah, that's Bryan Park. No, I have these mixed up. This is Maymont, which is like an outdoor, there's like a petting zoo and a historical house. My kid had her birthday party there. There's like a Japanese garden. We have a lot of just outdoor spaces from very wealthy people who turn their houses into fancy places for people to hang out outside for free. So this is Maymont. Then the green is Bryan Park, which is another big outdoor space. Lots of trees. There's an old house there. You're sensing a theme. Then we go into this brown color, which is the Canal Walk, where you can walk along where they have a canal that comes off the James Bridge downtown that takes you into Shockoe Bottom. There's a lot of great graffiti there and like murals and stuff. You can do like walking tours of where the murals are. This red is the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Fabulous art museum. My family are members there, and I'm assuming the red is supposed to be, there's a Best Cafe, which is named after the Best family, a very wealthy family who donated a lot of money. The blue, James River Rapids, the main waterway in not only in Richmond, but in Virginia in general. The black is the Poe Museum, named after Edgar Allan Poe. Pretty much every city on the East Coast of the United States of America likes to lay claim to Edgar Allan Poe. He did spend a good chunk of his childhood years here, and so Richmond has a claim to him as well. Then we go to this like pinky color, which is Tacky Lights Tour. I'm sure this is common in other places. People really do up their houses like the Great Light Battle on ABC kind of level of Christmas decorations, and people will rent limousines and party buses and just drive around to look at Christmas lights. There's like a 5K that you can run through these neighborhoods where the Christmas lights are just super fancy. Then we have the Altria Theater, which when I moved to Richmond, it was called the Landmark, and before that, people called it the Mosque. And I'm assuming the blue is supposed to be, there's like this ceiling that looks kind of like the sky when you go in there. There's like stars in the ceiling, so I'm assuming that's what the blue is. And that's these colors. As I said, she cautions you in the pattern that you're going to use most of where my Tacky Lights is, which is contrast color 9. I used over 10 grams of this, and I have a full skein of this. I have a full skein of the gold, I have a full skein of the purple, a full skein of the blue, and a full skein of the pink. And that's why I added the blue as this 10th contrast color as well, because I knew I would have more than enough, and I added it at the very end so I wouldn't sacrifice any of these minis here. And so those are the yarns I used. I also appreciate the fact that now I have, like, when I started knitting, it was very much like speckles and variegated and unicorn poop and all that kind of stuff. And it is nice to have a hand-dyed yarn that is more of like just a tonal and more subdued. And so I have a whole baggie here of my minis that I have left over. And yeah, I have at least 12 to 15 grams of all the minis left over. So these will probably become little Richmond socks for myself. And I think it'll make a nice little Christmas break project for myself. And I just have them in this little bag. As I was knitting, I just randomly pulled out colors, everything except for the full skeins. I randomly pulled them out of here, and then I just put them in the bag when they're done. So they can just stay in here for now. And then, as I was saying before, I still have a good chunk of like the full skeins that I have left over. But now, like, because I've done this and I wanted a project to kind of encapsulate these yarns, like these are some of like the first yarns I really like coveted and drooled over. And so I really wanted a project to do the yarn justice. So now I can like stash bust with that, and I'm fine breaking it up and doing something different. But I'm really glad that I got them all into one shawl. And now I can go all around Richmond and go to all of these places and take pictures with my shawl. It's a shame I just finished it this week, because last week we went to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and they have a Frida Kahlo exhibit happening right now, and this would have been awesome to take pictures of the Frida Kahlo exhibit. But I might go back before it leaves town and take some finished object pictures with this. But just be on the lookout, because I definitely plan to go to each and every one of these places and take pictures. The other thing I wanted to mention about my approach to this pattern is this fella right here. This is was a gift that I got. It's a Coco Knits. I probably should have looked up exactly what it's called, because it was a gift. I really didn't read the name of the project, but it's like basically a magnet board. And so opens like a book, and each side has magnets in it. And you can either use it like just like this, or one side props up like this. And this is how I do my lace charts. And it comes with its own magnets. And I believe you can buy extra magnets. Like there's one magnet that's just one single bar, and you can move it up and down and see the whole line. But it just came with a few of these Coco Knits magnets. And I put my lace chart here, and then I move my magnets around. I also have Post-it notes to keep track of where I am in the pattern. And this is my, I don't tell people like, oh, you have to have this, but to me, I really like this. I know a lot of people that do like embroidery and stuff like this too, because all of this is magnetic, and you have these extra magnets. So like if I'm knitting and I have like a crochet hook as like one of my notions, or I have metal needles for weaving in ends, they attach to this too. And like if you have like actual writing pens that are metal, they stick to this, and then you can, you know, close up your whole project in this. And so I really like this a lot. But you could, you know, obviously you could just find a piece of metal and some magnets and kind of do your own thing with this. But I just wanted to show y'all in case you were interested in something like this. And then, you know, obviously it lays your pattern really flat, and, you know, I just put it on my table, put it in my bag, and it protects everything, and it's just really neat. So I wanted to show y'all that. Wow, I got through all of that. I felt like it was gonna be like here all night, but that's basically thumbnail. The Audrey Shawl by Tricot Stitch. That's it. Let me know. I will put links below to the pattern, as well as my Ravelry project page for this pattern, so you can see all the final counts of the yarn I used. What are you working on? Have you wrapped up any of your projects? The only other thing is I started this in January and we're in April, so it took me a few months. I probably could have like blazed through this even quicker, but I was, if y'all remember when I cast this on, this was like a kind of like a weekend morning project for me, and I was switching between my two shawls, and I just did like a little section every week. But then like once I cast off that big ass quilt that I was working on, I kind of started jamming on this, and I really just took to it, especially once I found out how simple the lace was going to be. I kind of blazed through this, so this probably could have finished this in a month had I focused on this, but that was the other point I wanted to bring up. What are you working on? Do you have any finished objects? Do you like knitting lace shawls? Let me know. This is how I usually wear my shawls, unless like I'm out and about somewhere, but most of the time it's like a bandana style. And then when I get to where I'm going, I might do like a little off the shoulder situation. As always, you can find me at Rulude on Instagram. You can email me, candibknittin@gmail.com. You can send me a message on Ravelry, candibknittin. You can hit me up on Ko-fi, on Blue Sky, all of that good stuff. Until next time.